You've reached Monster 911, and I'm Lance Hightower. I've been taking cryptid emergency calls for over 5 years. If you have a cryptid emergency, please call our toll-free number 866-306-8085. I can help you. What's your emergency? Hello and welcome to Monster 911. I'm Lance Hightower, and it's so good to be with you again. Today you're tuning into part 2. When I pulled the curtain back, it was baring its teeth at me. If you didn't catch part 1, then click the link in the description below and get caught up, folks. It's a story you don't want to miss, so catch up now and then come back to this part 2. In addition, head over to monster911.com where you can show your support for this podcast show by grabbing yourself a cool Monster 911 t-shirt. They're heavy cotton and the print quality is excellent, and it can survive multiple washings, guys, without fading. Now, in this part 2, we continue to hear from Don about his traumatic cryptid encounter he experienced when he was a child and how that affected his life. These kind of creature experiences are often life-changing, and sometimes the most challenging experiences can be those we have when we are younger, especially growing up in a world where your parents tell you there aren't any monsters under your bed or in the dark corner of your room. Now, our parents were right, but, they may not have been a monster under your bed or the dark corner of your room, but they failed to mention, because they just were not aware, that monsters are actually out there, living well in the woods across America. Now, before we get to the show here quickly, this reminds me of when I was a young boy growing up in eastern Oklahoma. I remember I used to be deathly afraid of the dark. Now, I became fascinated with Bigfoot at around 8, somewhere between that 8 and 9 years of age. I remember coming across a book in a little store. My brothers and I grew up in eastern Oklahoma, and we lived outside of a town called Bragg's, and the grocery store was kind of Americana. They had everything, right? And there was a thick little paperback book, and it was about monsters, and they had Bigfoot in there, and I was totally fascinated. Well, the more that I read, the more I became intrigued and I became a little frightened. Well, my dad had a terrible affinity of scaring me. I was the oldest of 4 boys, and I became really deathly afraid of the dark, and especially it was emphasized to a high degree after watching in 1970s the Legend of Boggy Creek. I think that was 74. And after that, forget it. I had nightmares for months, of course, as most kids did after that. I begged my dad incessantly, and then he took me, and then I had nightmares, and about right after that's when I had my experience at around 10 years old. But I was deathly afraid of the dark for, honestly, till I was 16 or 17 years of age. It stayed with me a long time. And this was a way, I thought, I have to get over this, Lance. I was a hunter, but I never hunted alone too much. I was always with someone else, and I made sure to leave the woods when it was plenty of light, never when it got dark. And of course, when it gets dark, when the sun goes down, you have 30 minutes still to hunt, but I didn't want any part of that. But unfortunately, that's when the big bucks come out, right? And most of the interesting wildlife. So anyway, I just made up my mind one evening. I said, you know what? I have to get over this, Lance. I have to find a way to cope of this terrible fear. So I went running at night without a light. I put my running gear on. And where we lived, we grew up in state parks all my life. My brothers and I, my dad started as a state park ranger and worked his way up to a supervisor and then state park manager. And we lived in 3 separate state parks. And the last park was out at Watonga at Romano State Park. And we lived about 5 miles outside of town. And I remember there's a beautiful park where the park sits in a huge valley or a canyon with flat mesa tops. It looks like New Mexico. And there's natural creek bottoms, real cool water, and huge cedars. It's really quite beautiful. And at night, on full moonlit nights, I would run in the woods without a flashlight, and I would put my hands crossed in front of me going through the deep, dark timber until I would come up out of the ravine, up a steep embankment, and run on the flat mesa tops at night for miles. and you could see everything, so I knew which way to get back home. And I remember many times being quite a few miles away from home, and then I could just see the dot of our night light outside of our house, and I'd just run, and I'd get home at 12 to 1 in the morning. And, this was my way of coping with this fear of the dark. And I remember thinking, well, if I run into something, again, that's something I didn't want to say it, but if I run into a Bigfoot, then I guess, well, I'll work it out when I get to that point. Now, that sounds kind of silly, I know, and it's actually quite stupid. Ignorance is bliss. But uh, the thing of it is that I was willing to cope with this fear by subjecting myself to the ultimate. And so I don't recommend this. This is just what I did, what Lance did. I do not recommend getting over the fear by running at night without a light, without a firearm, going by myself. Um, this was just an odd way that I coped with it, and I immediately got over my fear of the dark. And I mean, it was instant. I had no problem after that. And so, but this was extremely dangerous. So, again, I do not recommend anyone doing this. So, let's go to the show and let's hear from Don about this traumatic cryptid encounter he experienced when he was a child and how that affected his life.
And
Right. Well, even the Greeks talked about dealing. They hired the dog-headed men as warriors to fight other clans. And if you look at Greek history and you look back at all the different things they talked about these dog-headed people, explorers coming around all around the world. I forget the name of one of the really famous explorers was talking about a land of people that were dog-headed people. They were vicious, meat eaters, carnivores. They were a vicious type of people, but they considered them a type of people. There was a whole bunch of them. Uh,
interesting.
I've heard lots of different studies on the ideals of werewolves and where they came from and so on and so forth. But I don't consider this a werewolf. It's something that is what it is all the time. It doesn't change. It is whatever it is. Um, yeah, it's not a magical creature. I think that there might be some sort of spiritual realm thing out there because of some of the things that is reported by different people. But I think it's totally separate. I think that's a spiritual issue that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
You're dealing with demons and demons that can take shapes of whatever.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think that's very interesting on a lot of these interviews that we've done that some people, as soon as they either use the Lord's name or go into a prayer or declare this entity, this creature be gone, so to speak, that it
Right.
leaves in multiple of these interviews. So I find that very, very interesting,
Right.
powerful, uh, very enlightening, and so that it leaves when there's no reason for it to leave, so to speak. You know what I mean? Uh,
Well,
the
and I think that also is based on your faith and the amount of faith that you have and where your faith lays. Because if you actually look at what the word says, I mean, God give us dominion over all the beasts of the field, and He had us name all the creatures in the beginning, and then He said, "I now give you dominion over all the beasts of the field. Whatever this is, it is a beast of the field."
Mhm. Fish of the
So
sea and birds of the air.
that's right. So if you take that literally, which I take the word black and white, it is what it is. It says what it says, and I believe it's a spiritual battle that we fight because the word says you wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and spiritual wickedness in high places. So
Hmm.
whatever this is, even though it's a physical thing, it's still a spiritual battle.
I agree.
But but
I
we still have dominion over it. So I think that depending on the person and their faith and where they're at when this thing happens spiritually, I think it may be forced to listen and mind, so to speak. I
Hmm.
don't know. I wasn't uh, in a place at that young in my life that I could talk to that.
Right.
I I don't know that I ever want to see it again. Um,
I
I,
hope you never do. I really
uh,
do.
with
I
that being said, there's a part of me that does want to see it. I don't know why. It's curiosity, maybe.
Well,
It's
I
kind
think you want what a lot of these others, and I say others, other people that have had very terrifying close encounters at various ages. I've noticed they've said the very similar, very similar mindset about they hope they don't, but they kind of hope they do have an encounter. And I think it falls back into validating in your head that you saw what you saw, it wasn't an illusion, that it wasn't a dream, and by seeing it again, as terrifying as it might be, it confirms that a lot of things. Number one, you're not crazy, you weren't seeing something. And secondly, that it it just solidly confirms that the world is a lot more mysterious than what you originally thought. It just confirms it and puts the rubber stamp of, yep, the world is a very odd, mysterious, crazy place.
of absolutely. Well, since I've been an adult and all this has come to light, and I've done all the digging and research that I've done, and I've listened to every possible Dogman encounter and as many Bigfoot encounters and things as I could, and listened, studied, watched, you name it, I've done it, trying to figure it out, trying to gather knowledge, and trying to find real knowledge. Not somebody talking out the backside of their rear end, but somebody that has real knowledge, somebody that you can trust what they're saying. Because again, I feel like it's, for me, it's ammunition. It's knowing okay, if I do run into something like this again, how do I react? What do I do right? What I do that don't do that's wrong? You know, you hear people talk about, well, don't shoot them, do shoot them. Lights, work, they don't work. They're either gonna mess with you or they're not gonna mess with you. And honestly, I think they're just like dogs and just like people. And that sounds like two different things, but really not.
I know,
Dogs and
I
people.
totally agree.
There's people that have good personalities and people have bad personalities. People that are psychotics, people that are just absolutely nuts and have a screw loose, and there are murderers out there that just absolutely just something flips in their head, and they can't think about anything other than killing folks, and so they end up in the pen or dead. I think animals are very similar mentally. I think you're going to have good ones and going to have bad ones. I've raised bulldogs my entire life since I've been an adult. I've actually raised and sold pit bulls for a long, long time. I've never had but one bad incident with a dog, and it was only that dog. It was an incident that he bit my youngest son on the arm, and he was playing. He wasn't trying to bite him, but he bit him on the underside of his arm whenever he threw his jacket up real high. And it wasn't because he was being vicious. It just was an accident. He didn't
Hmm.
maul him.
Right.
He could have. He was 130 pounds. He was a big, big bulldog.
Man.
And everybody around the whole neighborhood was scared to death of him because of his size. But I didn't dock his tail and I didn't clip his ears. I didn't want anybody to be fearful of him. I didn't put him on a chain, but he was very obedient. He did everything you said by command, including my kids. My kids were dominant over my dogs. If you do not take a strong dog and become dominant over that dog, it will become dominant over you.
Hmm.
And that's the fact of dealing with dogs, raising dogs, and teaching discipline to dogs. You have to be a pack leader when you're dealing with strong-bodied dogs, strong-minded dogs. A little dog can maul you. A big dog can kill you.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
I believe that. I heard that too. My dog that I have here, he still thinks he's a pup, but he's about 140 pounds. He is a Rottweiler Australian Shepherd mix, and he's thick, and
right,
he's a massive dog. He'll knock you down, but I've got to give commands and show him that I'm the alpha,
right.
and he knows that. He knows that, just the sound of my voice. But when he gets with other dogs, it changes.
Oh, sure.
And he
But you
listen.
want that to be. You want that to be because you want that dog to protect you and protect your family,
Hmm.
and that you're showing that dog from the time he's a pup who is a part of his pack, whether that's you and your wife and your kids, or you and your wife and your kids, your animals and your property, everything on your property belongs to him. They're part of his pack, okay, but you're still alpha.
Yeah.
I raised big dogs, I think, all my life because of what happened to me, because I wanted a more powerful dog with me, with my family, to protect them, protect me, anything that was in the woods, anything that I ran across. I wanted something bigger and badder than them. So I chose the most powerful dog that I could find, and I chose to raise it, and I chose to learn how to train it properly, and I chose to educate those around me that those dogs are not at fault. The people that choose to take those dogs and turn them into weapons on the street, fighting them against each other, should be put in chains and made to fight to the death themselves. Those folks have no idea what it's about raising animals. They don't understand that that dog has a spirit. It don't have a soul, but it has a spirit.
Mm, true.
You should treat that dog just like you would a person. And the fact that you don't abuse them, you're to care for them, to teach them love and compassion, and those animals will give you back everything you give them. That's the thing that I love about a bulldog. Is everything you give it, it gives back to you its whole heart. It gives back what you give it,
Mm,
love or hate. If you teach it hate, it's going to give it back. If you teach it love, it's going to give you back love with all of its life. It will defend you with its life, literally. My dog went out with my boys, and my boys went out in the woods, hog hunting, walking through God knows what kind of craziness. But I knew anytime that they ran across a wild animal, another dog, or anything that was trying to hurt them, my dog would die before he let my children receive harm.
mm,
And I've had my dogs give their life for my children. So
man.
I know that animals have personalities just like we do. I know
Oh
that
yeah.
if you train them, they're good. But wild animals, you don't have the opportunity to train them, but you still see the personality in them. You still see that they're good ones and they're bad ones. They're crazy ones. They're stuff you don't fool with. And I think that's what you're dealing with in all these cryptids, is all those different types of personalities.
Yeah, I think it's whatever the personality is at that moment that you encounter. It's from the experiences that it's gained up into that point. If it's been shot at, if it has had interesting, good interaction or encounters with humans, or what other animals it's encountered, or who knows. Uh, Up to that point, had its family been shot at, had it been shot at, had it been stabbed, had been people trying to trap it, or these MIBs shooting out of helicopters. I mean, we don't know up until that point, and that's why I just tell people in general, they're not your pets, because it's already, as an adult, formed its personality, and
Mm-hmm.
it's used to being rogue and wild. So It is, by all accounts, designed to hunt, to eat meat with teeth like that. Although I'm sure it's an omnivore, it probably
Mm.
eats fruits and whatever else it gets its hands on, different types of
Right.
whatever is it can't encounter deer or whatever. I'm sure it goes for smaller game or whatever it can, what sustenance it can find. But in going back, and you say it's connecting some of the dots, did you have any neighbors or other family members have issues or talk about things that they revealed to you out there in growing up?
Well, I've had different family members that have claimed to hear things, screaming out on the property, and most of them that I've talked to were cousins and my mom, my brother, and they attribute it to a panther, but I don't know if it's a panther or not. I've heard the screaming out there. I have heard a panther scream, and some of the things that we've heard out there absolutely sound like a panther. I've also, heard bobcats out, and when they're mating, their walls and screams are ridiculous, and it scare you to death when you hear them.
Oh yeah.
Especially you get a couple of males out there, and you've never heard them really, really cutting up. And if nobody's ever heard it, they need to go on YouTube and look them up because it is ridiculous. When you hear it, you go, "What in the world?" Oh my God!
Oh yeah. Yeah. There's
But
it, it'll put.
cats are crazy.
Oh yeah.
But
It'll put the
but
hair on
I
your
have
neck
heard
up.
something. But I have heard something with my cousin one night when we were camping up in the front pasture of the family property, and we were down at the very bottom next to a fence line and a creek in a corner of our uncle's property, great uncle's property, and we know that's a coyote crossing or a wolf crossing. And when we see them every night and going into my grandparents' house, there's a cattle guard there that you have to drive across going in and out. And every night, if you come in at dusk, you'll see coyotes or wolves running across there every night. And they travel through there, running back and forth from the pastures to the woodlands, back over chicken houses and stuff like that. So anyway, we were camped down there as kids, and the middle of the night, it was well after midnight. We got to hearing a bunch of puppies, and these puppies were just cutting up and having a big time right there in the corner of the pasture, and we were just right across the creek. And I told my cousin, I said, "Hey, we probably need to be quiet, because if there's puppies there, then there's a mama over there somewhere, and we don't really want them over here with us."
Hmm.
I had a 22, and he had a little 22s, so I mean, we could have protected ourselves if we needed to. But those puppies were cutting up for a little bit, and then the whole the they had been cutting up maybe 10 or 15 minutes, seemed like it was a good long time. And then this scream that ended with a growl, not a cat growl, but a real deep guttural "Grrr," after the scream
Oh wow.
uh, tore out. It was such a horrible yell. It put me into this shiver. I couldn't. It was uncontrollable. I couldn't stop shaking. It scared me to death. Um, and my cousin was, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I don't know what that is." He said, "Well, it screamed kind of like a woman." I said, "It kind of did, but didn't growl like a cat should."
Hmm.
I've heard cats growl, and that wasn't a cat growl. Um, so it kind of freaked me out a little bit. So I don't know exactly what that was, but it sounded very similar to a woman's scream, but it was ridiculously loud, and it ended with a really grumbly, deep growl.
Man.
And the only thing that I've heard close to that was when I was 17, 18 years old. Me and my best friend went out in the back pasture on the back side of the property, and we were trying out his predator call. He had um, actually, is what it was a deer bleat, is what it was, and
Oh.
he was doing the deer bleat, but he put it real high pitch for a fawn, and was making that fawn bleat,
Uh-huh.
and it was real high pitch. A distress call is what it was, and he had well, he called it his twilight scope, which was a night vision scope for hunting predators. And he had a 30-06, and I had a 243, and we were up in the back of his daddy's 4-wheel-drive pickup, and he had big monster flotation tires on it, so we
Hmm.
were like 8, 9 foot up in the air sitting on a toolbox, and we were spotlighting the back pasture using that bleak call. And so we done set it off, I don't know, half a dozen times, and we were spotlighting the far corner of the pasture, and there was another um, pasture that went further off into the bottoms. And we're seeing deer and eyes shine back off in there, and was trying to get it all to come up because I don't know if it was all of it was deer, some of it was deer, and I thought some of it might have been coyotes, and we was trying to call those coyotes in. I told him, I said, "Hey man, do that bleat one more time," and he did it one more time, and about the time he finished it, there was another really deep growl, sounding like it was right up in the truck with us. It was so loud and so bassy that it was almost like your eyes vibrated. It was ridiculous. It is nothing like I've ever heard, ever. Um, but I asked him, I said, "Man, did you hear that?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "It's right here with us." I said, "Well, I'm not getting down." And so we both had big bright headlights, lineman headlights. His daddy worked for Deep East Texas Electric Co-op. He's a lineman, so he's got these headlights that go on his hard hat with a band like a coon hunter. And we both had them. They had big 4-inch lights. And so we were spotlighting all the way around that truck, and we couldn't find anything. And we were 40 yards out in the middle of pastures. Whatever growled sounded like it was literally right there in the truck with us, but
Wow.
we couldn't see it. Don't know where it was,
So
what it was.
how tall was the pasture around you?
I'm sorry, the pasture was new mode.
Oh, it was okay. So it wasn't like 3 feet tall or anything around you.
No, nothing could have crawled up on us. If you had if you had low crawled in there, I could have saw you. The only thing that was close to us that I couldn't see through, one was under the truck, and just literally you could get on your knees and walk under the truck. It was so tall.
Oh, wow.
So it could have literally been under the truck, and we just don't know it. But 40 foot away was a creek about 10 foot wide and about 30 foot deep, and probably maybe 10 foot of water in it. So it was a bluff right there. It could have been behind that bluff, whatever it was. But the growl sounded so deep and so powerful, it seemed like it had to be right there on top of us. It was like it just didn't seem right that it was way off.
Well, it's possible. We know that certain animals, especially tigers, they can project their sound.
Okay.
They can project their sound where it's to their prey, where it's directed, intentionally directed, and it sounds like it's right there.
Right.
So it's possible. Um, did you
Well,
guys,
it
out of
could be.
curiosity, after that happened, did you get nauseous or anything, or disoriented after that?
We actually he actually had left his truck window, driver's window down about halfway, and if he hadn't been so thin, he couldn't have made it in. But anyway, he made it in the top of the truck without hitting the ground. Rolled the window down so I could get in, and we left that pasture. And this was about maybe 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, and we were up for 2 days after that. We couldn't sleep. We were wound tight. Other than that, um, I was tired, but I couldn't sleep. I don't know.
What did he
That's strange.
think? Had he seen anything, or what was he?
Neither one of us saw anything, or if he saw it, he didn't say. I asked him later on in life, after I got to researching all this stuff with cryptids and stuff, I asked him, I
Mm-hmm.
said, man, do you think that might have been a Bigfoot or something like that out there in them bushes or down that creek? He said, man, I don't believe in that mess. I said, well, you don't have to believe in anything to experience it. Will you experience something I did? What do you think? He said, I don't know what the hell that was, but I ain't saying.
Oh, that's what he said. I'm just not saying.
Yeah. Yeah. He
Yeah.
said he just wasn't going to say. He didn't know, but he wasn't going to say. He wasn't going to admit that he thought it might be a Bigfoot or something like that. But I mean, with the other things that I've heard people say about Bigfoot's growl and
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing, it made me wonder if maybe. I mean, we were off in my grandparents' place is off in the woods. It's in Granddaddy called it Chicken Bayou. It's off in Flatfoot Bottom, which is a creek that runs through the county, and it's a big creek, and it's big enough that you can set trot lines in it,
That's good
and
size.
it's pretty good sized creek. You got some real big bends in it, and some real wide spots, big enough you can run a motorboat down through it. So you're not just a little paddle boat, but it's not like that all the way down it. It's just in big sections. But it was a really, really big hardwood bottom down through there, and it was a lot of old growth timber. And like I said, Granddaddy's property was 10 generations old. It had a bunch of virgin timber on it. It was a beautiful place.
How old were you again experiencing that growl with your buddy?
I was about 17 or so
Okay.
this last time. Since then, I mean, I've been out there. I've hunted all my life out there. I've walked that place in the dark as an adult. After all these things have happened to me, like I said, I didn't even remember a whole bunch of this stuff until later on in life. I guess I buried it so deep that I guess, I don't know.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's what happens when you're young. I mean, we kind of have this built-in mechanism psychologically that protects our mind, and where fearful, frightful, very traumatic events are suppressed. One thing, and I know everybody's a little bit different on this, and I've never really brought this up a lot, but I've read into it, I've studied it actually quite a bit, and it depends who you talk to. Certain people will say, no, that opens up certain doors you don't want, but the way I look at it is very scientific. God created science and math and music, and this is kind of how I look at it. He created us, and there's a lot about us we still don't understand how our mind works that He created. It's quite
Sure.
a marvelous machine. It really is. It's an electrical powerhouse.
Oh,
There is the
yeah.
subconscious and the conscious part. I try to keep it very simple, the conscious and the subconscious. The subconscious is like part of the iceberg that you don't see underwater. The conscious part is that small portion that you do see above water. The subconscious remembers details, events, moments, dates, times, colors, and but to consciously bring up the subconscious is very difficult. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
So I wonder, my idea is to some of these people to get over, if you will, to find some answers. But I'm wondering if hypnosis, to go back and recount and record the session to the person, and that way it's fully disclosed, but that subconscious, what happens is it flips, that iceberg flips upside down where the subconscious is more exposed. That's kind of what the person conducting the hypnosis is doing. It's flipping the iceberg upside down. So now your subconscious that remembers dates and details and moments and colors and all these little details it remembers, and it's telling the conscious what you remember and saw. So I've often thought about seeing if that wouldn't be a way, with under the right circumstances, the right person, the willingness, if that would be something that would help heal. Because part of healing with a lot of these people that have had these very traumatic events is it's frightening, it's very difficult to kind of spit it out, but once they do, even the fearful part, they start to feel better about at least someone believing what they saw was real because they saw it, but also giving some encouragement on how to approach it in a different manner. So those are just some thoughts I've had. I've really not shared with anybody on talking about hypnosis. No one's really talked about that on any shows. Now, there is some clinical therapist that will do that very thing in trying to confront what happened, but it has to, in my mind, see, a clinical therapist, I've had a lot of people call and say, hey, I can help you out, Lance, I've done this. And the first question I have for them is, have you had your own creature experiences or anything? And they go, well, no. And I said, well, you're not going to understand then. You won't understand. So thank you, but no thank you. I think it really helps to have some level of experiences before you can really begin to truly help somebody. That's just my opinion. But that's just a thought that I had, especially I brought this up with the cousin that I got to interview in the Ohio Bigfoot attack. And I told him that, and he was open to it. The problem I have with him is that he's very difficult to get a hold of because he's still being watched. Even to this day.
Wow.
He's still being monitored.
Saving grace for me that mine happened so long ago.
Yeah, it really is.
Right. You know, that's the reason when I met you guys last year, I told you that you guys honestly were heroes in this community. And I see you guys as heroes in this community because you guys are some of the very few, and I mean a very, very few, that are really giving it straight, giving the real information, giving people help when they're needing help, information on what to do, what not to do. You know, those things that I searched diligently for years, thinking I was listening to some people that were telling absolute truth, and all they were telling was an idea of somebody else's that somebody else said that they didn't know about, that somebody else made up.
That's it. And
come on, you're going to get somebody killed.
Well, and then that's a very good point. Pardon me, just a second here. Hang on.
Yeah.
Okay, I had to kill a spider.
Awesome.
Sorry about that. If I didn't kill this thing, my wife would have jumped out of her. If she'd have come around the corner and saw that thing, I think I could have put a collar on it.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, sorry about that.
The joy of the country life.
Oh, it is. This thing right here, it looks like he's been eating some dog food. It's that big. Yeah, I saw it and I'm like, okay, it's coming my way, and it stopped. And I had a big book here on the shelf, and I just tossed it flat, and it couldn't escape the 12-inch diameter book here. So,
Right.
well, I know. I tell you, that's we don't get them like that in the city. So this one right here, it's I got to get it before my wife saw it. Otherwise, that wouldn't be good. Sorry about the interruption there.
No, not at all. But I appreciate the fact that you guys really do put out truth, and truth is really so rare today all the years that I spent online digging, and I mean really, really digging into different groups, Facebook groups, blogs, you name it, I had looked into it. And I've only found a very few folks part of the Bigfoot Outlaw group puts out truth. You guys put out truth. And I'm not even gonna name anybody else, but there are a few others that are really people that have had true experiences that are trying to spread good information. And in my opinion, there's nothing more powerful than giving someone truth.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Truth is enough to give people peace. That's what most people need. That's all they want is peace. They want to know, okay, I've got something that's slapping my house, okay, and I've got things looking in my windows. They're afraid of light. If I put light on my house and I put 500-watt halogen floodlights, motion sensors all the way around my house, is that going to help? Yes, it'll help. Okay, if that's not all that works and all of a sudden all your sensors are moved, okay, then you're going to have to put up taller light poles and you're going to have to put them away from your house, facing the back of your house or all your windows, so your house is now on display, but it's going to stop the boogers from getting in there and messing with you. Okay, if people knew that, and it's something as simple as putting up lights and focusing them on your house where they can't be turned and turned off, protect them with wires so they can't knock them out with rocks. It's something simple. Information is powerful.
yeah.
Now, if that doesn't work and you got something that's threatening physical harm, then you have to move to the next level.
Well, that's just it. Is that when we started out, we didn't want to just be someone, even though it is powerful behind the mic. We wanted to be a combination of. We didn't want to be storytellers because these are more than just stories. None of these, in my mind, you could tell there was a real experience that happened. And I always say you have to keep in mind, folks, that this happened to a human being. They've got emotion. It lasts with them for a lifetime. It can affect into their not only their daily life, their business, but their personal. And they may not even know why they're anxious or upset or angry when it's affecting that subconscious level of they've got questions still that's not been answered.
Right.
And that's the part that just keeps gnawing at you and gnawing at you. I said, but we want to be someone that goes out into the field and we want to try and experience and understand as well. So I said, we got to go out into the field too, as often as we can. And what works? I mean, we didn't want to be a hypocrite to say, oh, do this and that and that and this when we never set foot out in the woods.
Right.
And that would be, we couldn't do that. And I said, we won't do that. And so, there's some things that we try to give some advice to that's sensible based on the circumstance. And getting back to what you said earlier about, based on the situation, do I use a light? Do I not use a light? Do I do this? I'm going to say with all that, those are very good, I guess, contingencies to definitely think about, but it's always going to come down to the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Is what does the situation hold? Is this something daytime or nighttime? We can say that we understand a certain level of characteristics about them. They tend to be more active during storms of all kinds. Windstorms, snowstorms, hailstorms. I think it's to their advantage to move. They tend to very rarely be alone. They're usually in packs.
Scary thought, but that's absolutely right.
And so it is a scary thought. So this is why I tell people Don't assume anything. Don't assume anything that there's just that one, because they know how to, and in many cases, we believe they can create diversions, intentional diversions, where one has your attention as it lets itself be known, while there's one somewhere off in the tree line or off behind you. So, other features is that they are not really intimidated by us. We believe they know what a gun looks like and a knife looks like. They understand what they are. They may not call it a gun, if they could call, I say they call it. They just know that it makes a loud noise and it has this death type of association with it.
True.
And so they know what we believe knives and guns are. We believe that they do have some type of a language. Now, I'm not going to say it is like English or anything like that. That's not what I mean. But they have some level of communication between them.
Right.
Aside from the fact that they have a hierarchy, for sure. I believe that they do have tendencies just like a dog. And I believe that they have tendencies very much like a human. And that's what makes them scary. Walking upright, having shoulders like a man, being abnormally and supernaturally massive and fast and huge compared to known canines or humans. That level of speed and size is superhuman. And that falls back under the premise of these Nephilim that were supernaturally strong. So we've given some decent recommendations here and there, but every circumstance is going to be a little bit different. But you've got a lot. You know what's going on. I mean, your background and everything. So you're a lot more. The biggest thing is that you're well aware that they exist. That's the first thing.
Right.
That's the first thing. You know they exist. It's a little more cumbersome when someone has no clue, and they find out in a matter of seconds.
In the last 24 hours that these things were real, it'll be in a whole nother conversation.
Yes, exactly. Well, you have yourself a wonderful rest of the evening, and a great weekend. We'll talk here soon again.
All right, brother. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. You too, brother. Take care.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Bye.